Hello, everyone. I'm John O'Loughlin. Welcome once again to McDuff Lives. And it's so great to have Adam Finnegan come back to talk about his new Substack, Jeffrey Epstein and Biological Warfare. Wow. Let's get started. Adam Finnegan, welcome back. So great to have you here.
Thanks for having me. Good to be
Adam,
here.
you just published Substack on Jeffrey Epstein.
Epstein. Yeah, well, however you want to say it. Epstein. Yeah, I did. I was never really planning to go in that area either, but
well, thank goodness you did, because this you're the guy, the author of The Sleeper Agent, the book that really opened my eyes, and I think thousands of people by now have picked up on the actual history that you've given of biological warfare, and the fact that they're very, very sneaky about it, but it also has turned into a gold mine for certain people who can convince the government that it's a national security issue, that you've got to create viruses in order to be ready to defeat viruses if case somebody else makes a virus. And the government says, okay, sure, go ahead, here's $1 billion. And Jeffrey Epstein is right in the middle of it. So you dove in and took a look into the new releases of the Epstein papers. Tell us what you found.
yeah, I mean, it wasn't exhaustive, but there's so much that I like within a short period of time that I could find, that it was like, well, if I go back into it, I'll just make another article or something, but I'll just take what I have for now and put this out. It was interesting because there was speaking of which, what you had just said about that, there was that paper from Boris Nikolic, the Bill Gates advisor. He worked for the Bill Gates Foundation, talking about how it's only a matter of time till something goes wrong.
Now he's a new character to me. Would you spell his last name, please?
Okay, so it's Nikolic.
And his relationship to Gates and Epstein?
Yeah, I'll tell you. He was a Serbian. Hold on, is this the right guy? No, this doesn't seem like the right guy. Okay. Oh, I see. Hold on. Is this him? Oh, he doesn't have a Wikipedia. So he works for the Bill Gates Foundation. And he was Bill Gates Foundation. He was in communication with Epstein quite often when Epstein was working with Bill Gates, and he was working with Bill Gates for quite a while, and he was a lot closer to him, it seems, than the public is told.
So it's Boris, and his last name is?
Yeah, Nikolic.
Okay.
And he was a doctor, an investor who was a close associate of Epstein's, but he was also helping. He was like Bill Gates. I'm positive he was with Bill Gates.
Yeah.
And actually, I looked him up the other day too, and I saw something about him having an interest in immune tolerance. I didn't go further into that, but I should. And we know that Bill Gates had been funding that research on disease tolerance as a defense strategy.
So this Boris Nikolic has
Yeah.
it's in your Substack.
Yeah.
Wrote to whom? To Epstein?
Epstein. Yeah.
And
He was.
he says, hey, it's just a matter of time. The
Yeah.
way biology is so complicated, we're going to find that something bad's going to happen. We might not know what it is, but it's definitely going to happen. And when did he
Yeah.
write that? Back in
This was
2000.
2010. He said,
Yeah.
it's a question of time when the critical mass is reached and when something will go wrong. I bet most likely something will go bad, not because of bad intention to hurt people, terrorism and such, but rather because of the fact that biology is much more unpredictable and thus uncontrollable, and that often consequences are opposite what we initially expected.
Well, that sounds actually kind of like warning, saying, don't go there because you don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, and then like there's other places in the email where in the emails that I found where it looks as though they're talking about setting up clandestine laboratories. There was this woman, and I think so. There's all this work on the herpes virus research and the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is it's like it's like the certain. Okay, so it's a cranial nerve and plays a crucial role in the autonomic nervous system, which is responsible for regulating involuntary functions within the human body. And saying that like virus reactivation from the vagus nerve is key, and that a lot of times sicknesses start with the vagus nerve. And so they were very focused on this vagus nerve and saying, I'm pretty sure I know who it is. I'm almost positive. And there's one email where I do know who it is, where they're talking about the vagus nerve. And it was this woman, Melanie Walker. She's a neurosurgeon. And she was also working for Bill Gates, for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. She was also a member of the World Bank. But she was also close to Epstein. And it was through Epstein that she got all those positions.
So let me make this, because this is shocking to me. You're saying that these folks were actively working on using the vagus nerve to reactivate viruses.
Well, the way they're saying it, it could be like, and this is how often biowarfare research is discussed as though it's medical research. Like, for example, one said, had another vagus thought about infectivity. It innervates the throat, both motor and sensory. I believe every single sore throat means vagus is compromised. That's why influenza makes you achy, since it enters nervous system there. Wow. That's also where I think you get some diarrhea and enteric root as well. And then she says need to immunize the vagus nerve, right? Then in another email says, let's start a Vegas lab somewhere cool that can be edgy and act quickly and do it like no other. And then says, check this out, and sends a link to the vagus nerve on Wikipedia. Then says, I think you should fund some cool herpes research that could be seriously revolutionary. Don't worry, it's not money for me. Would you consider it if the experiments and outcomes were plausible? Say yes. P.S. Yes, it would involve the vagus nerve. P.P.S. I would insist that the first paper that results from the work is called What Happens in Vegas Stays in Vegas. But I found the one that I was saying where they're saying need to immunize the vagus nerve, that's definitely Melanie Walker. because she says just boarding a flight to Seattle, and she lived in Seattle. Then she said, "Have fun with Stevie," and she's married to Steve Sinofsky, who works at Microsoft, and says, "Hope meetings with Bill productive." And she was a member. She was working with Bill Gates, so that's definitely her.
So, and I'm sorry, I'm struggling with this, and I apologize if I misinterpret, but it sounds now what I'm hearing is a sales pitch, is to say, look, nobody's
Setting
really working. Nobody's working on this issue. The vagus nerve is key to all kinds of problems, from herpes to sore throats to, diarrhea.
Yeah.
So,
Mhm.
what if we could just come up with a vaccine that would immunize the vagus nerve? It's kooky. I've never heard of any such a thing. Now,
Yeah.
how far were you able to follow this line of correspondence?
Let's see what else I got on it. I'm gonna have to keep going on it. I think I thought I had gone through everything. I'm not sure though.
Well,
Not too
let's
sure.
get back. Let's go back to the work you have done in your new Substack then, and trace through what you have been able to connect between Jeffrey Epstein and the biological warfare studies that you've been doing for 9 years now.
Well, as we know, that whole virus reactivation. Oh, there was another email too that talked about reactivation. Said, oh, they all think about the role of bacteria invading. Vagus will end up being key since its only link by way of enteric and central nervous system. No one looking at viral stuff, and Vegas, which is where I think the big news will be. I wish I could do it. Herpes reactivation from vagal ganglia causing paroxysmal afibrillation. And so herpes reactivation, as we know, is one of the Eric Traub bioweapons mechanisms, virus reactivation, right? And they like everything that I compiled in here has a lot to do with the stealth weapons of biological warfare that Eric Traub pioneered. So I have a lot of this stuff on the herpes virus, and there's a really interesting email where he's talking about biocryptography. That's like that seems to be the word to describe these stealth bioweapons. Biocryptography, cryptic. It's hidden. It's stealth. There was an email from Jeffrey Epstein to Martin Nowick, and Martin Nowick is the guy who was running Harvard University's evolutionary dynamics program. And just to back up a little bit, so Jeffrey Epstein Foundation was they established a program he was funding and established a program for evolutionary dynamics at Harvard University with a $35 million gift to the university under the direction of Martin Nowick. The program is one of the first of its kind to study the evolution of molecular biology with the primary use of mathematics. And so they talked about, it is one of the first departments to develop a mathematical model of how cancer cells evolve, as well as infectious bacteria and viruses such as HIV. And the program's models have led to key discoveries towards fighting several diseases. Pivotal work done in mapping colon cancer resistance to inhibitor drugs, mapping the progression of pancreatic cancer, targeting the topology of minority mutations that drive tumor growth, and creating a database to predict and minimize resistance to HIV drugs. And other current research topics include evolution of cooperation, cancer, viruses, evolutionary game/graph/set theory, pre-life protocells, eusociality, evolution of construction, population structure, all sorts of other stuff. But curing the world of cancer, infectious disease, selfishness, and inclusive fitness theory. So, and
So
just
for
remember,
$35 million, you know, you write a paper that says that, and you can become a great researcher.
right. And so back to that cryptography thing,
Okay.
he's writing to this guy. He says, I think an example of deception and biocryptography would be the herpes virus. Herpes viruses have acquired a variety of different mechanisms to protect itself from the damaging effects of host immunity. Frequently, these viruses subvert normal immune regulatory functions utilized by the host. This is a typical predator prey. The focus should be herpes virus genes encoding known or potential immunomodulatory proteins. Include inhibition of complement and antibody function, herpes virus encoded homologs of cytokines and chemokine receptors, and potential disruption of cellular recognition of virally infected targets. What does that sound like? It sounds like Eric Traub's old work with LCM virus.
Can you break that down for me?
Yeah,
Because
because you know,
a
yeah,
lot
of
of those
course.
words are like, you know, too big for my little brain.
So, okay, where he says the viruses subvert normal immune regulatory functions utilized by the host. It basically just means subverting the immune system.
So what you're saying is shutting down my P53 gene, right?
Stuff like that, yeah.
Yeah.
And genes encoding known or potential immunomodulatory proteins is basically those antigens, those immunosuppressive antigens, the proteins on the spike protein on the herpes virus, and which are basically the same as the ones that Eric Traub was. It's those really nasty ones. And the inhibition of complement and antibody function. The inhibition of antibody function. Remember how Eric Traub's LCM virus, that he was able to infect these mice and they had no antibodies, right? And complement is like, it's called complement fixation. It's like you mix something with the blood and you see if it produces what is called complement. You mix it with like antibodies and you see if it produces a certain reaction, and you know that it's infected. Well, it's like being able to subvert that, being able to be completely stealth.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And just basically being able to subvert all of the different mechanisms that the body has to overcome a disease or a viral infection. That's what he's saying here. And excuse me. It's like, so, and you got to remember, like when they're talking about that funding, all of those things that program was able to do, like we're gonna, try to overcome disease. All of that is said in a way that sounds like they're really trying to do good.
Sounded good to me.
But what you got to remember is that's how they phrase all biowarfare research too. Because let's remember, what do they do in order to get there? Well, they start creating situations of antibacterial resistance in order to study it, right? It's kind of like, well, we got to make dangerous viruses so that we can protect against them in order to do what we just said here,
So Jeffrey Epstein, how big of a player is he in this market for so-called cures, but stealth weapons?
I mean, he was very wrapped up. We got him meeting with, or he was trying to meet with this guy, Ian Lipkin, who was a very big name in public health and in science. And I mean, Bill Gates, we all know the Bill Gates Foundation, how wrapped up in public health they are, right?
Yeah.
I put the link to that disease tolerance as a defense strategy down in the bottom of this article, and they're working with NIH and other medical foundations. And there's one point where Jeffrey Epstein is talking to Boris, and it sounds like he's the one advising the Bill Gates Foundation. So, like, telling them what to do. Because there's an email, I'll find it in a second. Oh, he says they're talking about the financial system and disease, and the way to look at both of them. He's like, the big idea, and one that will make you rich beyond comprehension, is that we should craft a new financial system. Global currency, the financial, is still antiquated. Religion has changed more than money, attacking problems from a Martian standpoint. And then he says, disease should be looked at as uncovering the disease algorithm, not solving one example, then on to the next. The problem is not intractable. It just sounds like he's advising them on what to do. And we know this guy is an intelligence guy. I mean,
he's supposed to be a wizard at mathematics. And so when you say algorithm, I think he's kind of considering biological systems as solvable with an algorithm.
Right. I just, obviously he got a lot of intelligence connections. Well, Juliet, one of the victims, Juliet Bryant, who I'm friends with, said that she told him directly that he worked for the CIA and had her whole family on a list. Like, it was one of, I don't know. It definitely seems like he does have these connections, and especially, he was also talking to this other guy who was very high up in the national security arena and in biodefense, named Dan Dubno. He was he had connections to DARPA and national defense, right? And he's sending Jeffrey Epstein things like, I don't know, one was an article, Bioterror Failures Criticized, about Obama's failure to address the bioterrorism threat correctly. And then he's sending them this list of things that they should do if they want to pitch. It sounded like he was trying to come up with ways of dealing with pandemics with Bill Gates, and then trying to pitch it to the State Department to get them to take that on as biosecurity measures that they would kind of, and they called these deliverables. It's like a pitch for things. And this guy, Dan Dubno, is sending them all this stuff. Like, for example, he says, take the Hourglass Initiative from the theoretical and conceptual stage and turn it into an active NGO. Needed immediately. A business plan, a budget, a timeline for deliverables, and the official 501c3 filing. And he's like, lists a whole lot of like stuff, some of which is working with existing organizations in some capacities. These include Council on Foreign Relations, Carnegie Endowment for Peace, Center for Biosecurity in Baltimore. Just all sorts of stuff. And then even down here, he says something like Department of Homeland Security, Science and Technology. So he was, and then there was another email with him and Bill Gates where he mentions these deliverables and saying, this should be in the form of deliverables. And if I could find it, hold on.
Deliverables with a hypodermic needle, you mean? No.
So it's a word for like a pitch, like a pitch to the State Department of certain biosecurity measures. It's like a way of presenting.
Okay. Packaging.
Like this is going to be our biodefense strategy. It's like a pitch, deliverables. That's what they call them, I guess. Okay. But it was like he was saying to I think it was to that guy. Yeah. Okay. So it was to Bill Gates, actually. I don't know if it was Jeffrey Epstein he was on. It probably was, but saying, Bill, Larry and I have been working on deliverables for my time at BGC3 since you and I spoke. At Larry's request, I have spoken with Roger, Mark, Chris, Trevor, Jeff, and next week, Bose Jonah. Everyone has offered guidance, advice, thoughts, and ideas. As Larry works to put together any required documentation, we are trying to make sure we can do this time, make this time valuable for all. 2 areas where I'm interested in terms of scope: domestic health and neurotech/brain science. I propose these as deliverables. Please let Larry and I know what you think. And it says, he says, these are the deliverables. 1, to improve access and secure personal health data. And says, let's see, blueprint and or recommendations for a zero knowledge proof-based digital system to secure private personal health information while access to digitally redacted personal information. 2, white paper on consumer health expenditures in the U.S. 3, white paper and or recommendations on neurotechnologies related to chronic disease and degenerative disease. 4, white paper on neurotechnologies as weapons in national intelligence and defense. 5, follow-up recommendations and or technical specifications for strain pandemic simulation. What does that sound like? Simulant tests. Or, yeah, like simulant tests. Because that's what the simulant tests were, simulation tests, right?
So-called harmless. Yeah. Don't worry.
And so I just was really amazed at how much, and he was also talking to someone named Mary Erdos. She's an investment manager and executive from the JP Morgan Asset and Wealth Management Division. And they're talking about R&D, which for anyone who doesn't know, research and development, right? And he's saying, I will get more detailed answers, but for now, not sure what you mean by R&D. No input from the foundation into investments. Donors can choose from either a custom-made portfolio or a choice of silos and be able to switch. 2, mostly initially American. Initially, however, we should be ready with an offshore arm, especially for vaccines. So it's like, it's definitely, this guy he was working with Bill Gates and they were very wrapped. He was like, I would say he was probably like an off-record advisor, right? He was advising them, but it was like off-record. They didn't want people to know Jeffrey Epstein was advising them. And he was probably an intelligence guy. He probably did work for the CIA. But they just seem to have a lot of knowledge of these stealth weapons or all of these aspects of Eric Chaub's older weapons and immune tolerance. And also I found, here's a really big thing. They seem to know a lot about how these bioweapons or how these diseases, these bioweapons cause amyloidosis, the prion disease, right? So there's a bunch of
and what happens in amyloidosis?
It's protein misfolding. You know Kevin McCairn, right?
Yeah.
That's the area of amyloidosis, like the prion diseases. You know how he's finding prions or misfolding, those protein misfolding, prion-like proteins in all of the people getting that COVID vaccine. Some people will get the virus itself.
But is this connected to those white things that clog up the arteries?
Yeah, and the things that they're pulling out of people.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's the result of protein misfolding. I have to learn that.
Absolutely. That's amyloidosis, okay? And that's like the idea when you're saying amyloid, just think that. There's somebody who reaches out to Jeffrey, Judith McCloskey, says, Dear Mr. President, Dear Mr. Jeffrey Epstein, as director of the Prevention Alzheimer's International Foundation, I am contacting you to suggest a project which would help millions. I am the founder and previous president of the Prevention Alzheimer International Foundation, registered in Switzerland. Presently, I am director of this new foundation, blah, blah, blah. It says, as soon they're talking about the cause of Alzheimer's, right? And she starts talking about how it's infectious. She's like, as soon as in 1907, Fisher suggested that microorganisms might play a role in senile plaque formation. Amyloidosis is frequently associated with chronic bacterial infections, and experimental amyloidosis can be produced in vitro and in vivo.
Okay. Experimental amyloidosis can be produced in vivo. Is that what you said?
In vitro and in vivo.
Gotcha.
Which is in vitro is the petri dish. Yeah. In vivo is in the actual subject. But the biologically active components or antigen, or because those antigens are amyloidogenic. But it says, from 1993, our research focused on the role of various spirochetes in Alzheimer's disease. Increasing amount of observations indicate that several types of spirochetes, including various periodontal pathogen spirochetes and Borrelia burgdorferi, are involved in the pathogenesis of Alzheimer's disease. And then there's this other email where it's Jeffrey Epstein talking to somebody who's redacted, says, sorry to hear about your dad. I'm next in New York around the 7th. I can give you all you ever want to hear about amyloid. And then another source in redacted talking to Epstein says, I've told you and always believed that Parkinson's is an autonomic infectious disease and has nothing to do with degeneration. We can prove this. And he also has an email to attend a webinar, The Hidden Epidemic of Lyme Disease. So he's interested in these areas. And
what for, though? For what purpose?
Well, because of all the stuff we're talking about. I mean, the biocryptography, right? For example, he's also, I put in this post about his correspondence with a guy named Michael Citrick, who is like this, he's a prominent figure in strategic communications or reputation and crisis management. So it's like propaganda. And he's like strategizing with Epstein about how to like boost his image with all the negative stuff about him being a predator. And he says, Jeffrey Epstein tells him, spend a minimum of 2 hours a day searching for the world's smartest people, bleeding edge scientists, and actively involved in the formulation of some of the more esoteric areas of exploration, biocryptography, quantum gravity, multidimensional game theory. So he's like, these are areas that he is very wrapped up in. So there's biocryptography is like a watchword, a vague term for these areas, right? And then it's not surprising that around all of this time, okay, this was 2011, all the other stuff, a lot of the other stuff with Boris Nikolic, let's see when that was. That was, let's see, and Dan Dubno, 2009. 2017 is this other one. Boris Nikolic, 2011. And remember, all of this is occurring. And then in 2012 is when the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation funds that paper, Disease Tolerance as a Defense Strategy.
I'm just going to jump in because I went over to Wikipedia to refresh myself on Ian Lipkin, and man, he is all over this stuff with biosurveillance and and SARS-1 was his big thing, as well as West Nile's virus. And
Mm-hmm.
here it says Lipkin was asked to join the Defense Science Board task force on SARS quarantine guidance during the height of the SARS outbreak to advise the U.S. Department of Defense on steps to domestically manage the epidemic. And then it goes on about Eco Health Alliance. He's part of that with Peter Daszak and all of those nuts.
Not surprising, is it?
Not at all. And now, but your material that we've talked about so far is 2010 or early 2010 era. This is all preparatory. We've had a lot of events since then, especially the next SARS that comes along. Is
the one with Ann Lipkin? I have one with Ann Lipkin, and that's 2012. That's 2012, and he's trying to set up a meeting with the guy. He says, "Oh, it's Ian Lipkin's writing him." He's saying, "Dear Mr. Epstein, Alice Rubinstein introduced us in October due to the complexity of coordinating 3 calendars. I'm following up at his recommendation with the hope that we may find it easier to meet directly. I directed the largest and most productive center for pathogen surveillance and discovery, housed at Columbia, the Center for Infection and Immunity and Associated World Health Organization Collaborating Center is poised to expand from metagenomic and zoonotic disease research to address the role of gene-environment timing interactions in neurodevelopmental, neoplastic or cancer, and autoimmune disorders. The strategies and tools needed to do this are largely the same. Thus, I'm confident this new initiative can succeed and have huge impact on human morbidity and mortality. Please suggest a date.
Good impact or bad impact?
A huge impact. Yeah,
Okay.
right. So
yeah.
please suggest a date and time we can meet to discuss your vision for basic and translational public health and see whether a collaboration makes sense. All the best wishes, Ian Lipkin. So, I mean, he's saying right there that Jeffrey Epstein has a big hand in this, has a very influential role in public health. Right? I mean, or at least they're very open to.
Well, it sounds like he's asking for money. He's saying, Jeffrey, I got this great program. We got all the tools together. We've got these super ideas. We're gonna solve all these human problems, and
right.
We're gonna affect human health and mortality. Okay, yeah. So and then Jeffrey is kind of like the in between to go to the Department of Defense or to State Department.
And then he also said, he says, so in that work, in those emails with that guy Citric asked, do you still do charity work? Was trip with Clinton, Ehud Barak for charity, still doing charity work and friendly with those people? He says, yes, he is very much involved in philanthropic and charitable work now in healthcare, science, and medicine. So he's like very involved in all of these NGOs in medicine, health, science.
What I am hoping for, Adam, is that through the lens of Jeffrey Epstein's, sordid story, people generally will understand that this biological warfare is really going on. And that, although they're a nice little doctor, who they've loved and raised them from, raised their children, told them to get all the boosters, he might have been wrong about that. To consider that Jeffrey Epstein is involved in obtaining the financing and getting petitioned by scientists to say, hey, look at this great idea I got.
Yeah,
and then
you
couch it in this crypto language so that, it's a nod and a wink, hey, we're working on great stuff we're going to solve cancer, Yeah. Well, they're going to figure out how to give people cancer maybe, but, that's a different way to solve it, I guess. But it's an opportunity that your work does is to tie these two things together, the horrific things of a Jeffrey Epstein and the horrific things of biological warfare as practiced on all the people of the world at this point.
Yeah. And the in my book, I talked about how they hide everything. That's kind of like key to understanding the biowarfare aspects of these emails, because, and it's like the Soviet bioweaponeers guys saying we would always talk about things as though they were cancer, as though they were medical treatments and vaccines. We would even talk about them amongst ourselves as though we're only discussing medical advancements, not bioweapons. So that's kind of like the way that game is played. And I think that's another very important aspect in my book, is that I'm able to show people how they hide it, why they hide it. They don't want this because they don't want people knowing that they're doing this. They don't want to get caught. So I gave many examples of these Soviet bioweaponeers talking, because they had written books where they're saying that we had to disguise our language. We had to disguise how we talk about it. It's a very important part of my book, that because most people, when they go to research biowarfare and stuff, they don't talk, like they'll never say that, oh, they're never going to say something is a weapon. They're never going to say that. And I say that in my book of the 5 angles of biowarfare. They never call a weapon, right? And that guy said, instead of calling a spade, we talk about it as treatments and vaccines and things like that. And who's that guy? Yeah, he says that. And warfare, how they discuss it, how they hide it. And so when I'm looking at this, is dual weapons, right? And
I'm afraid we lost a little of your audio. We lost a little of your audio there.
Yeah.
Say that again.
Yeah. It's dual use. Hopefully this won't cut out anymore. But it's dual use, meaning that they could go at it in terms of medicine, but they also could go at it in terms of weapons. Mm-hmm. Dual use, right? Because all of the research is the same pretty much, although I guess with gain of function it's a little different. I don't know. I mean, it could go either way. But one thing that one thing that stood out to me was how, hey, these guys are talking about this stuff and know about all of this immune tolerance, virus reactivation, all of that stuff. But when they talk to the public about it, they don't say any of this stuff. So what we're seeing is they're going by one set of expertise, but they're telling the public an entirely different thing. Mm-hmm. Kind of like with the COVID vaccines, right? When they were saying, like, they're telling people this fairy tale immunology. They're like telling people as though it's going to give them immunity, even though it didn't stop the virus at all. And then they started changing their story, and they're like, well, we're just going to suppress symptoms, right? We're going to suppress symptoms. And how they're going to do that? By suppressing the immune system and causing immune tolerance. But they don't talk about this. They don't tell anybody, even though that was their goal. I am certain that was their goal when they developed this. That was their goal because, back in, Bill Gates was funding it. Disease tolerance as a defense strategy. We'll burn out your immune system to deal with this crisis, under the assumption that, well, if we can suppress your immune system, you won't have this fatal reaction. But that doesn't necessarily mean you won't have a fatal reaction. It just may mean that the fatal reaction you have is a little different than the COVID-19 disease that is portrayed. Instead, you're going to have a heart attack. Instead, you're going to have a stroke or whatever. But that's going to be written off as that's never going to be connected to the vaccine. So then they can still get away with, oh, we stopped these diseases. We stopped deaths of COVID-19, but they just caused death in other ways. And they also burn out the immune system and cause these slow chronic diseases. Like the whole idea, and we've talked about this many times, it's ludicrous to go with that kind of strategy. It doesn't, there's not a lot of evidence that it brings any benefit, but it's definitely, there's a ton of evidence that it causes long-term, even catastrophic harm.
Which is what you would want to do to an enemy in a world war that was trying to kill you.
And then when you realize that it was Konstantin Chumakov running vaccine who approved the COVID vaccine, and then you understand who his father was, who I talked about in my book a lot, it all starts to kind of make sense. We have these enemies that are working within. What did Eric Traub do when he was? Go ahead.
No, tell us about Eric. Yeah, go.
Well, one thing Eric Traub would do when he was attacking us, what did he do? He it was all in the guise. It was in the guise of protecting us, right? And that seems to be the methodology. We need to protect you, but instead we're going to attack you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what were you going to say?
I was going to ask you, because we just got a couple of minutes left, but a number of people in the chat had commented earlier about herpes, and you had started talking about herpes, and I know herpes appears in your book a lot in the different strains of herpes.
Yeah.
When I was in college, all of a sudden this problem of herpes came along. And people had these sores on their lips, and it was like, oh, he's got herpes. And to me, it was horrible because I didn't want to get herpes because then, what if I wanted to kiss somebody? And that would just kill my social life. And it became a huge thing. And of course, there's other herpeses that go to other places, where you really don't want to have sores.
Yeah, definitely.
Hanging out, when you're trying to go out on a date with somebody. And it was a horrible sensation, and so they started selling these salves and all that stuff. But it seemed to me that it just kind of came out of nowhere at the time. And now with all of this work that's been done, and I think one of the things that you quoted was that herpes, has effects that people don't see. In other words, it goes to the vagus nerve, and when it goes to the vagus nerve, then it can cause all of these other things. To what extent do you think or see that they've been working on the herpes virus in order just to do that, to get into the vagus nerve and cause us more problems?
Yeah, I think, well, first I would say that, and Nick Petoskey has agreed that these probably came in through a lot of the vaccines, all of these herpes viruses.
Oh.
Right. And that was, so yeah, they can cause, like when reactivated, they can be highly neurotropic. They can be highly neurotropic in that they go to the brain and cause, you can look on PubMed, and these 8 herpes viruses are associated with so many disease manifestations. It's not even funny. Everything from autism, suicidal ideation, mental problems of all kinds, psychiatric problems of all kinds. And then also there's oncogenic potential. They're, when reactivated, are carcinogenic or oncogenic or neoplastic, as they say. And they probably, in this team, the Traub, right? So absolutely, they would have been working on these things. And I know that there were a lot of like cancer conferences. There was one that MP Chumakov actually took part in and they would always be talking about the herpes viruses. Like with SV40, when they're talking about SV40, a lot of times there was other talk about the herpes viruses, a similar thing, you know? So absolutely, this was something. I mean, when Eric Chaub made those spirochetes and had those nasty proteins that would cause immune tolerance, one of the main goals in that was not so much to give you the spirochete infection, although that was part of it, but to reactivate all of those latent viruses. That was like part of the bioweapon, and to set off those just nasty, just that whole
It's
chronic disease, that systemic chronic disease, turning
what
your
you
body against you.
what you are explaining is so important that I wish I had a bigger mouthpiece to say, look, everybody, listen to Adam, read his book, because it is so insidious that you think of a bioweapon and you think of anthrax, right? Or you think of botulism, or you think of sarin, or you know, some specific thing that is specifically geared to kill you.
Mm.
And I always think of I always think of bioweapon as something really nasty that has to be hidden away, and
Something that
make sure that
kills.
it's something that it itself kills. But what you have described answers so many questions about where did this disease come from? Where did herpes come from? Where did cancer? Why do we have all of this cancer? What is long COVID? Where does Lyme disease really come from? All of these things, and it all is tied up not with giving you a specific causative agent that hurts you, but by giving you a specific causative agent that disables your immune system.
Yeah, and it's like, so a lot of it too is like putting burden on the country by destroying your health, but you're kept alive, you're hardly functional, but then you also have these mental illness factors. And what does that do to a society, right? What does that do
Mm-hmm.
to it? It's just like when you target the brain, you target the welfare, the general well-being of the country itself, right? So it's, and then when you have all of these two going, so in a way they are like fatal, but it's like first we're gonna make you suffer for like way long. You know, we're gonna disable your immune system and make you suffer for years and years and years, and then finish you off with cancer. It's like the idea of these weapons. I know it's horrifying, and I don't like it any more than anybody else, but that's what they were meant to do.
That's what they were meant to do, I just, yeah, it's. I understand, the psychologically, if you build your world about, I'm going to be a mother, a father, I'm going to have children, I'm going to have a doctor, I'm going to have a hospital in the town, I'm going to rely on this. I'm relying on the police, the fire station, I'm relying on my neighbors, I'm relying on the school system. All of this, I have I put all my markers on this, that
Yeah.
this system is the one that I'm going to trust. And it is so hard for people to think that they can't trust that system. But,
Mm-hmm.
and it takes a special person to go there, Adam, and you are that person to me. I can't tell you how much it means that I've been able to work with you now for 2.5 years, and let's just keep going and try to get the word out. Adam's Substack is under your name, right? Adam
Yeah,
AW Finnegan.
at AW Finnegan, right? And I just put there was actually a post before the Epstein one. It was a presentation called viral latency and reactivation, and what it means, because it was part of the adventitious virus forum that he was putting on. I did a little present. I put it on my Substack, and I talked about how much of it's only a 10-minute presentation, but it just shows, and it talks.
We're losing your audio a little bit, Adam. Let me fill in for you here. Go to Adam's.
Contaminating a vaccine.
Let me fill in, because we lost some audio, but I want to get this information out to people. But Adam did a slide deck and presented it as part of one of Nick Petoskey's seminars, which is really worthwhile. He talks through the slide deck on a video that he's posted on his Substack right before the most current one. I just watched it and I found it to be really helpful. If you want to start understanding this stuff in more detail, take your time, slow it down. It's very educational. And so what was the name of it again, Adam?
Viral latency and reactivation. And I think it was, I have it. Okay. Vaccine contaminants and chronic disease.
All right, Adam Finnegan, check it out. Substack over on Substack, Adam Finnegan. Make sure and get the book Sleeper Agent you can get it at Amazon. If you want the audio version, go to Adam's website, thesleeperagent.com, and grab the audio version. It's all available and it's all essential. Thanks very much, everybody, for your attention. Spread the word. And we'll see you again, I hope, real soon, Adam. Thank you so much.